They were just babies, three golden-furred puppies, barely a month old, trapped in silence beneath the crushing coils of a monstrous Burmese python. One could no longer cry. One had stopped moving. The last, trembling, stared up with wide, terrified eyes, as if pleading for someone, anyone, to come. But no one was there. No one, until he showed up. It was the kind of Florida evening that wrapped everything in a damp, oppressive warmth. Thick air clinging to every surface like invisible moss. In the far southern edge of Homestead, where civilization met the swamp, the cicadas screamed through the dusk, and the grass steamed after a lazy sun dipped beneath the palm-lined horizon. Marvin Doyle, 59 years old but looking closer to 70, trudged up the cracked concrete steps of his home, a squat, one-story cement structure once white, but now permanently stained with mildew and rust from hurricane seasons long past. His skin, leathery from years under the sun and spotted with old burns from welding work, glistened with sweat as he dropped his frayed canvas tool bag by the front door. It was empty, not of tools, but of opportunity. He had just returned from yet another failed job interview, this time with a private AC repair company that wanted younger men who could handle attic heat. He hadn't even gotten through the full sentence of his pitch before the manager dismissed him. The sourness of rejection hung heavier than the humidity itself. Inside the house, the air was still. The ceiling fan turned lazily but did little to fight the rising heat. Marvin stood in front of the fridge and stared at its insides. Half a loaf of bread, a small carton of expired milk, and a single bottle of cheap mustard. The $300 in his pocket, recently returned to him by an old neighbor who had borrowed it during better days, was all he had left. His electricity bill was overdue, his car insurance had lapsed, and his stomach hadn't known a real meal in 2 days. Still, the money sat there in his wallet, folded with almost ceremonial neatness, waiting for the decision he kept putting off: survive or delay the inevitable. As he slumped into the torn vinyl armchair in the corner, a sharp, faint sound sliced through the window screen. It was high-pitched and irregular, like a wheezing cough crossed with a squeal. Marvin lifted his head, brow furrowed. The sound came again, urgent and close, from beyond the chain-link fence that bordered his property to the east, where the backyard turned into a tangled marsh of sawgrass and wild palmettos. He hesitated. The smarter part of him, the part worn down by poverty, age, and bitterness, told him to let it be. South Florida was full of weird noises: raccoons, alligators, feral cats, lost iguanas. It wasn't his problem, but then his eyes drifted to a photograph still clinging to the side of the fridge with a faded magnet. A boy, 12 years old, holding a fishing rod, smiling with a front tooth missing. His son, Isaac. Gone now. Not in death, but by choice. A choice Marvin had made for him, walking away when the divorce turned ugly and leaving the boy to grow up without him. That sound outside didn't let up. It clawed at something inside him that hadn't moved in years. Slowly Marvin stood. He took the flashlight from the counter and, after a moment of thought, grabbed the long rusted pipe he used to prop up his broken screen door. The backyard had no real fence. It ended in a waist-high tangle of weeds and old cypress stumps. As Marvin stepped through, his boots sank slightly in the soggy ground. The noise grew louder, frantic now. Then he saw it, or rather, he saw the motion first. The dry rustle of grass, then a blur of coiled muscle writhing against the silver sheen of the flashlight beam. And there, almost hidden in the underbrush, was a shape that froze him in place. A massive Burmese python, thick as a tire, body wrapped around what looked like a pile of struggling fur. He gasped as his eyes adjusted. Not a pile, 3 puppies. Golden-furred, about the size of melons, limp and soundless under the crushing weight of the snake. One of them twitched. The others looked still. The python's head was raised, tongue flicking, unbothered by Marvin's presence, like a god surveying a meal it had already claimed. "Jesus," Marvin breathed, stepping forward without knowing why. "No, not like this." He raised the pipe and shouted. The snake didn't move. He swung, hitting the ground beside it with a crack. That got its attention. The reptile hissed and began to tighten. A choked whimper came from the smallest pup, a sound like air forced through wet leaves. Marvin didn't think. He lunged and struck again, this time hitting the serpent's coils directly. The python whipped around and sank its teeth into his forearm, deep, burning pain. But Marvin didn't stop. He slammed the pipe down again and again until the snake uncoiled with a slow, angry slither and retreated into the shadows. Marvin dropped the pipe, knelt, and scooped the puppies into his arms. They were all still breathing, but barely. One had a bruised paw. The smallest had foam around its mouth. Their fur was matted with mud, blood, and leaves. He turned back toward the house, adrenaline still coursing through his limbs. Inside, he cleared a drawer, lined it with the softest towel he had, and laid the puppies in. The house was too hot. He placed bowls of water beside them, crushed a piece of stale bread into milk, and fed them slowly with a spoon. The smallest one, a female with one floppy ear, tried to lick his hand. Later that night, as he cleaned the wound on his arm with rubbing alcohol and duct taped it shut, he opened his wallet again. The 3 bills stared up at him, his last $300. He closed the wallet, stood, and walked to the door. He didn't need to think about it anymore. The next morning, he returned from the local feed store with canned puppy food, medical gauze, and a small bag of dry kibble. The cashier, a weary woman with too many earrings and dark circles under her eyes, had told him, "You know, animal control might just put them down if they're too sick." Marvin had nodded, but said nothing. The receipt in his pocket said $289.76. Back home, he sat beside the drawer, now warm with a heating pad, and watched the puppies sleep. One snored faintly. The room was quiet except for the whirring fan and the sound of his own breath. And for the first time in a long while, Marvin didn't feel alone. Marvin's house was never meant to shelter anyone but him. It had no carpet, no insulation, and the faded blue curtains over the windows were more for keeping out judgmental stares than sunlight. The air was hot and unmoving. He had laid the puppies in a wooden drawer lined with a pillowcase, the softest thing he owned, and the drawer itself sat on a low coffee table beside the old recliner. He had angled a floor fan toward it, but the fan wheezed more than it spun. Marvin sat cross-legged on the cracked linoleum floor, a damp cloth in one hand and a spoon in the other, watching over the tiny golden bodies as if watching over embers that could go out at any moment. The smallest pup had stopped moving twice. Each time Marvin had rubbed its chest, whispering low encouragements, his hand trembling with something he hadn't felt in years, fear for something other than himself. The other 2, slightly larger, whimpered occasionally, shifting weakly in the heat. All 3 were coated in a sticky mix of dirt, blood, and dried sap. He had tried washing them in a plastic basin earlier, but their tiny yelps made him hesitate. He didn't want to frighten them more than they already had been. At dawn, Marvin walked a mile to the only store still open early, a feed shop run by a man named Darren, who didn't speak unless spoken to and never smiled. Marvin bought a small carton of powdered puppy milk, a cheap bottle of antiseptic, a roll of gauze, and a $3 plastic dropper. The total came to $289.76. He didn't even glance at the change. Back home, the drawer pups, he had started calling them that, lay in better shape than the night before. Marvin gave them the milk, 1 drop at a time. The smallest, now with a makeshift name in his mind, Tiny, suckled weakly. The others, slightly more alert, blinked up at him with unseeing, cloudy blue eyes. He noticed one had a small white blaze on its nose, the other a scratch running down its left side. He made a mental note to name them later, if they made it. That afternoon, while Marvin was rinsing out a towel by the side of the house, a small voice came through the fence. "Mr. Marvin, you got puppies?" He turned, startled. Standing on the other side of the sagging chain-link fence was a girl, maybe 10 years old, with an oversized red t-shirt and jeans rolled up above her ankles. Her hair was pulled into 2 tight braids, her skin light brown, her eyes the color of strong tea, sharp and observant. She held a battered pink notebook under her arm and stood barefoot on the patchy grass. "Liliana?" Marvin squinted at her. "Your mom know you're out this early?" She nodded, stepping closer to the fence. "She's at work. I do online school in the mornings, but I saw your light on last night. Then I heard crying. It sounded like babies." Marvin hesitated, wiping his hands on his shirt. He had seen the girl before, watching him from her porch when he fixed things in the yard. An old lawnmower, a rusted fan, a garden hose with 20 holes. She never said much, just watched, quietly curious. "They're dogs," he finally said. "Barely alive. Found them last night." Liliana's eyes widened. "Can I see?" He wanted to say no. He wanted to keep everything small, simple, in the drawer, in the living room, out of the world's reach. But something about her, maybe the steady way she looked at him, maybe the way she clutched the notebook, made him nod. "Come through the gate. Mind the latch." Inside, Liliana knelt beside the drawer like someone kneeling at an altar. She didn't squeal or reach out or try to grab the puppies. She just sat, legs crossed, staring at them. After a moment, she asked, "Can I help?" Marvin studied her. She looked like a child raised on silence, like someone who knew not to ask for much. He nodded again. "Wash your hands first." For the rest of the day, she helped him. They made a system. She fed them from the dropper, while he cleaned the gauze and rotated the towel packs. Every so often, she would whisper things to them. Soft things, half-songs, pieces of stories. She told him the scratchy one should be named Dusty, and the one with the white blaze should be River. Tiny stayed tiny. At one point, when Marvin stepped outside for a cigarette, he told himself he wouldn't smoke. He noticed a woman standing on the porch of the neighboring unit. She was tall and tired-looking, mid-30s, with her black hair tied in a messy bun and an apron stained with flour. Her name was Maria Alvarez, Liliana's mother. She gave Marvin a nod, not a polite one, but a respectful one, the kind you gave a man who hadn't yet messed up. "Just checking she's not bothering you," she said. "She's helpful," Marvin replied. "Knows when to be quiet. That's rare." Maria nodded again. "She likes animals. Her dad used to bring home strays." There was weight in those words, but Marvin didn't pry. She disappeared back inside. As night fell, Marvin checked the power bill again. Disconnected in 2 days, he had $10.24 left. He could use it to buy a cheap fan at the thrift store, or more milk. He stared at the puppies. The drawer pulsed gently with their shallow breaths. He stayed up most of the night, turning the fan manually when it stalled. When it got too hot, he soaked washcloths and hung them near the pups. When they cried, he lifted them gently, letting them feel the beating of his heart. Just before dawn, Tiny sneezed, and Marvin smiled. The morning sun had barely broken through the humid veil of Homestead when Marvin set out again, this time not for supplies, but for answers. The pups, Tiny, Dusty, and River, slept nestled together in their drawer sanctuary, bellies full and noses twitching in their sleep. Liliana had gone back to her house after helping with the early feeding. She had left behind her pink notebook, the corner pages filled with scribbled puppy names and cartoon doodles of floppy ears. Marvin placed it carefully on the counter and walked out with the same rusted pipe he had used to fight the python. The air was thick with the smell of swamp grass and gasoline from a nearby lawnmower. A few neighbors were already awake, dragging trash bins to the curb or watering patches of stubborn grass. Marvin nodded at no one. The brush behind his yard looked different in daylight, less monstrous but still unsettling. He stepped carefully through the flattened grass where the struggle had happened. Blood had dried into dark patches on the earth. A piece of snapped-off branch still bore a smear of red. Marvin crouched down. Something glinted under a pile of leaves, a strip of rubber. He pulled it out slowly. It was a section of elastic restraint, the kind used for cargo or sometimes animal transport. Crusted blood clung to it, and attached to one end was a thin, torn scrap of what looked like insulation fabric, the kind used in makeshift bedding. He followed the trail further into the undergrowth, heart tightening with each step. Then he saw it. A shallow, uneven mound of disturbed dirt, partially hidden under an overgrown palmetto. Marvin froze. He took a step forward, then another. Using the end of the pipe, he brushed aside the top layer of earth. The smell hit him first, metallic, sour, the unmistakable scent of something that had once lived. His stomach churned. He uncovered the body slowly. A dog, not a pup. A full-grown female, her golden fur stained dark with decay, her neck marred by a sharp, clean slash. There was no way a python had done this. The cut was deliberate, controlled. Along her back, he noticed 2 healed scars crossing in an X. Marvin knelt beside her, mouth dry, and whispered, "You were their mother." He sat there for a long time, surrounded by buzzing flies and the rustling leaves. Something about the kill was wrong. Too clean. too intentional. And the placement, hidden but shallow enough to be found by animals. Was she meant to be discovered? Or had someone panicked and buried her in a hurry? Marvin reached for the tattered blanket partially sticking out from beneath her. It was filthy, but as he tugged it free, something caught his eye, a patch of duct tape still clinging to the edge, faint black marker visible under the grime. He pulled it close and read the words, Unit X3 vertical bar reject. Back at the house, he examined the pups more closely. On Tiny's back right leg, just above the joint, was a faint residue, like glue or tape once stuck there. He hadn't noticed it earlier in the panic of saving them, but now it was undeniable. Someone had marked these puppies, tagged them, labeled them for what? Discard? Experimentation? He needed to talk to someone who might know more than he did. The only vet clinic Marvin had ever used was a small mobile unit run by a semi-retired vet named Dr. Irene Castell, a woman in her late 60s with sharp cheekbones, thinning silver hair tied in a clip, and a voice that could hush a room without raising an octave. She had once treated Marvin's old mutt, Samson, back when his wife was still around, and money didn't taste like guilt. He called her number, still taped to the back of the fridge, and left a message. By afternoon, she arrived in a dented white van with faded paw print decals along the side. Dr. Castell was tall and moved with a stiffness that came from years of bending over tables. She wore a khaki vest with too many pockets and carried a battered leather case that looked older than Marvin. He led her inside, explaining what had happened in short, clipped sentences. She said little until she examined the pups. After running her fingers gently over their spines and bellies, she turned to Marvin. "You know what this looks like, right?" Marvin shook his head. "Tagging system, used in breeding facilities, legal and illegal. X3 means the third litter from a crossbred pair, usually tagged for culling. Reject means they weren't suitable for sale or further testing." He blinked. "Testing? Some groups use designer breeds for behavioral trials, some worse. You don't want to know." "Why dump them in the wild?" Dr. Castell stood. "Because it's cheaper than euthanasia. Because it makes good footage for rescue videos. Because people are cruel, Marvin. You found them too early. You weren't supposed to." Marvin clenched his jaw, the pipe across his lap suddenly heavy. Before she left, the vet handed him a small packet of puppy dewormer and instructions scribbled on an index card. "And Marvin," she said as she paused at the door, "if someone comes asking for them, don't give them up. I've seen this before. They'll lie, threaten. They don't care about the dogs. They care about what gets traced back." After she left, Marvin sat on his porch as the sun lowered behind a cloud of sticky heat. Across the street, Liliana was chalking something on the pavement. 3 little figures with wagging tails. She looked up and waved. Marvin raised a hand in return, but his mind was already far away. In the grass, in the grave, in the quiet, deliberate cruelty of the world he thought he had left behind. The next morning, Marvin woke to the sound of his own heartbeat pounding against a pillow soaked in sweat. The house was already hot. Florida heat didn't wait for the sun anymore. The pups were restless, their drawer too warm despite the fan rattling on its last leg. Marvin wet a rag and draped it over the fan's front, letting it drip slowly as it spun. Dusty let out a soft grunt of protest as he turned. River nuzzled into his siblings, and Tiny was chewing absent-mindedly on the corner of the pillowcase. They were stronger now, barely, but stronger was enough. Marvin poured a mug of water, took one sip, and then, almost as a habit now, stepped outside. Liliana was already sitting on the curb, a battered laptop on her knees and a phone in her hand. She looked up and waved, her braids slightly undone, her cheeks smudged with sleep. "I started searching," she said before he could ask. "About that mark. X3 reject. I found a bunch of weird videos." Marvin sat beside her, the concrete warm under him. She opened her laptop. The screen flickered, and then a video played. Grainy footage of a dirt road, a box in the middle of it, a voice behind the camera whispering dramatically. The box shakes. A puppy cries. Moments later, a man walks into frame, kneels, opens the box, and exclaims, "Oh my God! Who would do this?" Dramatic music plays. Cut to, the same man bathing the puppy. Cut to, the puppy sleeping on a fresh bed. Marvin squinted. "They uploaded like 50 of these," Liliana said. "Same guy, same voice, Different puppies every time. Same box, Marvin muttered. She nodded. And the channel gets donations. They put the PayPal in every description. Some of the dogs look like Dusty and River. One of them even had a scratch in the same spot. That was the moment Marvin felt it. Not just disgust, but something deeper. A revulsion that came from recognizing not only cruelty, but calculated, polished cruelty sold as compassion. The name of the channel was Heart Rescue TV. The page had over 400,000 subscribers and was filled with rescue videos, tearful updates, and donation drives. All the comment sections overflowed with sympathy. Bless you. How can I help? Angels like you make the world better. Marvin felt sick. He didn't know how to investigate such a thing. He knew wires, insulation, corroded coils, not the internet, not scams, but he knew when something stunk, and this stunk. I know someone, Liliana said, standing, someone who tried to expose this a while ago. That afternoon, she returned with a folded flyer, part of a community bulletin. On the bottom corner, in faded ink, it read, Animal Exploitation in South Florida, Investigative Talk by Ruby Navarro, April 2022. The name meant nothing to Marvin, but Liliana was determined. She's on Facebook, still posts. Ruby Navarro had a face built for camera and a voice built for confrontation. In her 30s, with dark, wild curls and a tattoo of a swallow peeking from beneath her collarbone, she had once worked for a regional news outlet, but had been let go for refusing to kill a story about corruption in a local nonprofit. Since then, she'd become something between a whistleblower and a digital ghost, posting exposés, vanishing, reappearing elsewhere with another investigation. Marvin messaged her. He didn't expect a reply, but that night, as the pups slept and Liliana drew them in her notebook, his phone buzzed. From Ruby Navarro. Heard about you from someone in Homestead. You still have the dogs? To Ruby Navarro. 3 of them. Found in the brush behind my yard. One had a tag, X3 reject. From Ruby Navarro. I've been trying to prove Heart Rescue is fake for 2 years. Never had proof they hurt the dogs themselves. Just suspected. You might have something. She arrived the next morning in a dusty green SUV covered in bumper stickers. No excuse for animal abuse. Question everything. Journalism isn't a crime. She wore cargo pants, combat boots, and a sleeveless hoodie. Her face had the kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep. It came from knowing too much. Inside the house, she knelt beside the drawer and stared at the puppies for a long time before speaking. I've seen dozens of litters like this, she said finally. They look like rescues, but they're bred for sympathy. Dumped with just enough injury to break hearts. Picked up by the same crew that dumped them. Filmed, cleaned, uploaded, rinse, repeat. Marvin sat stiffly on the edge of a chair, watching her. How do you stop something like that? You don't, Ruby said. Not alone. But if we film where you found them, if we find the remains, you might have what I never did. The before shot. Liliana offered to show the footage she'd saved. Ruby watched in silence. When it was over, she pulled a DSLR from her pack. I'm going to document everything, carefully. You can't come at people like this with half-truths. They have lawyers. They know how to spin. But the internet also loves a good reckoning. Before leaving, Ruby handed Marvin her card. If anyone shows up asking about the dogs, call me. Don't engage, especially if they say they're from a rescue. That's how they clean up. Marvin nodded, heart heavier than when he began. That night, as thunder rolled low in the distance and the swamp hummed like a machine in the dark, Marvin lay awake, one arm on the floor near the drawer, fingers twitching every time one of the puppies stirred. He didn't know how deep this went. He didn't know who watched the watchers, but he knew now he wasn't imagining things, and he wasn't alone. The rain came hard and sudden, pounding the metal roof of Marvin's home like fists. It was the kind of storm that flattened grass and bent palm trees, soaking the earth in minutes and turning backyard patches into shallow lakes. Inside the house, the power had flickered out around 8:40 p.m. The fan went dead. The light bulb above the kitchen table blinked twice, then surrendered. The air thickened instantly, and the drawer where the puppies slept became a sauna. Marvin placed them, Tiny, Dusty, and River, into an old cardboard box lined with rags and moved them closer to the front window, hoping for some breeze through the mesh. Their eyes had opened fully now, all three a soft, cloudy blue, still too young to walk far, but able to wriggle and bark in protest when uncomfortable. Tiny, as ever, was the most sensitive, yelping at every thunderclap. Marvin sat close, one hand on the edge of the box, murmuring low, nonsense sounds to keep them calm. It was during the third flash of lightning that he saw movement near the fence, a slow, sliding motion. Too fluid to be a man, too large to be a cat. Marvin stood up, peered through the rain-blurred glass, and felt his stomach drop. There, cutting across the flooded strip of lawn like a muscular rope from hell, was the Burmese python. The same one. He recognized the scar along its midsection, a raised patch of scale where he had struck it weeks ago. It was bigger than he remembered. Or maybe the fear made it seem that way. "Liliana," he said quietly, turning toward the door. She was sitting on the porch swing under a tarp with a flashlight and her notebook, drawing by the dim beam. She had insisted on staying over during the storm, claiming her mom worked nights and wouldn't be back until morning. "What is it?" she asked, looking up. "Get inside, slowly." She obeyed without question. The moment she passed him, he shut the door and grabbed the 2 metal cooking pots from beside the stove. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "That thing's back." She didn't ask which thing. She grabbed a wooden spoon from the drawer and followed him out the back door. The rain blurred everything. Marvin's boots squelched in the flooded yard. He couldn't see the snake, but he could feel it, some instinct in his chest tightening. Then Liliana gasped and pointed toward the shed. The python was coiled halfway under the structure, tongue flicking, slow and deliberate. Marvin raised a pot and slammed it against the other with a crash that echoed through the storm. The python froze. Liliana joined in, banging the spoon against the metal railing, her face pale but steady. "Go!" she shouted, her voice cracking. The snake hissed, then moved. Slowly at first, then with a whip-like twist as it slithered back toward the brush. The two of them kept the noise going until it disappeared completely into the tree line. Back inside, Marvin dried the puppies, who were now shivering and mewling in confusion. He checked each one for signs of injury. They were safe, for now. But the fact that the snake had come back haunted him. Not out of vengeance, not even for food. Maybe it had remembered where warmth lived, or maybe something else out there had drawn it. That night, Marvin didn't sleep. By morning, he was already sketching blueprints on the back of an old cereal box. A cage. No, not a trap. A perimeter. He wasn't planning to catch the snake. He just wanted to create a wall. A boundary that said, "Not here. Not anymore." Marvin visited a salvage yard on the edge of town, owned by a man named Pete Carson, a wiry ex-con with an eye patch and a quiet drawl. Pete was in his late 60s, wore denim overalls without a shirt, and had a tattoo of a bull on his neck. He wasn't known for generosity, but he had a soft spot for Marvin ever since the day Marvin had helped fix a broken condenser on Pete's truck for free. "I need mesh, thick stuff, not chicken wire," Marvin said. Pete studied him. "What for?" "Keeping something out." Pete squinted, then nodded toward a pile near the back. "Take what you need. Don't ask what it was used for." Marvin spent the rest of the day building. He drove steel rods into the mud, zip-tied reinforced mesh between them, and constructed a makeshift perimeter behind the house. It wouldn't stop a determined person, but it might slow down a snake, and more importantly, it sent a message to anyone or anything that thought this home was still undefended. Liliana helped, dragging lengths of mesh across the yard and learning how to knot ties with her small hands. Maria, her mother, came by briefly to check on her. She was tall, heavy-set, wore her hair in a loose bun, and carried the smell of flour and vanilla with her. Maria's face bore the tiredness of someone who had worked through pain, and her tone with Marvin was cautious but not unfriendly. "Keep her close," she said, nodding toward her daughter. "She's all I've got, and she doesn't scare easy, but snakes—" Her voice trailed off. Marvin promised he would. By sunset, the backyard had changed. The wild was pushed back. The house, though still sagging at the corners, looked like it was beginning to stand for something again. That night, Marvin left the porch light on, just in case. He slept on the floor next to the box, one hand draped over the edge like a guard dog in denim. He didn't dream. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind that began with birdsong and heat rising from the pavement like steam from a boiling pot. The Florida sun hadn't yet reached its cruelest point, but Marvin already felt sweat clinging to his back as he loaded the 3 puppies, now nearly 5 weeks old, into a repurposed laundry basket lined with towels. Tiny was the most alert, nipping at Dusty's ear, while River squirmed impatiently, already too big to be contained for long. Their fur had filled in, soft and honey gold, and they were beginning to resemble the full-size golden retrievers they were meant to be. Ruby had arranged an appointment with a trusted vet on the other side of town. Dr. Amir Patel, a quiet man in his early 40s with thick glasses and the tired patience of someone who had seen too many hopeless cases. He ran a modest practice behind a strip mall, tucked between a thrift shop and a Cuban bakery. Marvin had agreed to meet Ruby there, though part of him still bristled at the idea of someone else controlling the narrative. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and dog biscuits. A faded poster on the wall showed a smiling family hugging a Labrador with the slogan, "Rescue is love." Marvin sat in the corner with the basket on his lap, eyes scanning the room. Ruby hadn't arrived yet. A woman with a white poodle glanced at the puppies and smiled politely. Marvin nodded stiffly. The door swung open. A man entered, early 30s, tall and lean, with a shaved head and mirrored sunglasses perched high on his face. His arms were ropey with muscle and heavily tattooed, the most striking ink being a black serpent that coiled up his left forearm and vanished beneath a rolled sleeve. His walk was loose, predatory. He wore boots that looked too expensive for someone coming into a clinic like this, and a shirt that read, "Rescue, Rebuild, Release." Marvin tensed. The man scanned the room and locked eyes with Marvin. Then, slowly he approached. "Nice dogs," the man said, voice low and smooth like wet stone. "Golden, huh?" Marvin said nothing. The man crouched beside the basket, his fingers brushing against the towel. "They got tags?" "Back off," Marvin said. The man stood, smiling faintly. "They're not yours, you know." Marvin rose to his feet, fists clenched. "They're not yours either." The smile vanished. The man leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "They're rejects, left for dead. That means no one gets to keep them, especially not some rusted old handyman playing savior." Behind them, the receptionist had frozen. Marvin heard a beep, the soft sound of a phone recording. Ruby had just walked in. She stood by the door, camera app open, filming without blinking. Her presence was quiet but electric. The tattooed man glanced at her, then back at Marvin. "You'll regret this," he said, stepping back. Ruby smiled sweetly. "Say that again for the camera." But the man was already leaving, pushing past a woman entering with a cat in a crate. He disappeared out the glass doors, boots clicking on the pavement. Marvin stood in silence, the pups restless in the basket. Ruby lowered her phone. "You okay?" she asked. He exhaled. "I don't scare easy." But that man wasn't bluffing. Dr. Patel called them in. The exam was thorough. The pups were underweight but recovering well. He scanned each one, no chips detected. He applied flea treatment, gave Marvin a bag of medicated kibble samples, and handed him a sheet with future vaccination dates. When Marvin offered to pay, Dr. Patel waved him off. "People like you are rare. The world doesn't thank you enough." Back outside, Ruby posted the video. Within an hour, it was reshared over 1,000 times. She blurred Marvin's face, but left the confrontation audio intact. She added a caption, "This man tried to claim 3 rescue puppies as reject property. Is this what rescue looks like now? #heart rescue, #not an hour watch." By evening, the video was on Twitter, Facebook, and a dozen animal rights forums. People were angry, really angry. Some recognized the man from other so-called rescue videos. A few posted screen grabs of him lifting boxes on camera, smiling while cradling wounded dogs. One comment stood out. "At Pet Vet Mom, I saw him in Tampa. Same snake tattoo, same van. This isn't isolated." Ruby kept her phone in hand the rest of the night, fielding messages and tip-offs. Marvin watched from the porch, the pups snoozing in a playpen he had built from leftover mesh fencing. Liliana sat beside them with a coloring book, humming a made-up song that involved all 3 puppies getting superhero capes. Across the street, Maria watched quietly from behind her curtains. Later, as the sun set and the heat gave way to a breeze, Ruby joined Marvin on the porch with a bottle of iced tea. "You did good today," she said. "I didn't do anything. You didn't back down." Marvin took a sip. The tea was sweet, almost too much. I've backed down most of my life, not today. She nodded, watching the trees sway in the distance. He'll be back, you know, or someone else will, but they won't expect you to be ready. Marvin nodded slowly. I'll be ready. The air smelled like jasmine and lemon oil, clean, calming, deceptive. Marvin shifted uncomfortably in the lobby chair, his eyes scanning the polished marble floors and the minimalist walls painted in creams and gold. The place looked like it belonged in a wellness magazine. A small water feature trickled near the entrance, and behind the sleek glass counter sat a woman who looked too poised for this part of Homestead. She was in her late 20s, with immaculate skin, a tight bun that didn't allow a single hair out of place, and a name tag that read Camilla. She smiled when she saw Ruby enter, all professional warmth and white teeth. "Welcome to Soul Spa and Pet Boutique," she said. "Do you have an appointment?" Ruby, dressed in her usual combat boots and field vest, returned the smile with one of her own, polite, pleasant, but laced with something just beneath the surface. "Actually, I'm here to speak with Mr. Jace Moreno. He's expecting me. I run a rescue operation, Paw and Purpose. We talked online." Camilla blinked once, then tapped something on her iPad. "Of course. One moment, please." She picked up the phone and murmured into it, eyes flicking briefly to Marvin, who sat still and silent, trying to look like someone who belonged in a place with lemon-scented towels. After a few moments, Camilla hung up. "Mr. Moreno says he'll be right with you. You can wait in the retail gallery." They were led through a hallway where high-end collars and organic pet shampoos lined the shelves like luxury cosmetics. At the far end stood a door labeled "Private Staff Only." Ruby raised an eyebrow as they passed it. Marvin noted the 2 security cameras tucked neatly into the ceiling corners, subtle but well-placed. He'd seen better setups at military installations. A few minutes later, the man from the video arrived. Jace Moreno was taller than Marvin remembered from the footage, broad-shouldered with perfectly tailored slacks and a designer shirt that clung to his frame. His hair was cropped tight, face clean-shaven, and his smile was the practiced kind that could turn on like a switch. He wore a gold watch and no visible tattoos, though Marvin suspected they were just hidden by sleeves. "Ruby Navarro," he said, voice smooth like butter melting on a hot pan. "Pleasure to meet you in person. And you brought your associate?" "Marvin Doyle," Ruby said, "volunteer. Helps us evaluate facilities. We're looking for potential partners. You run a very discreet operation, Mr. Moreno." Jace's smile didn't waver. "That's what our clients pay for." He led them through a frosted glass door into what he called the conditioning wing, where dogs in pristine kennels lounged on orthopedic beds. The lighting was warm, the temperature perfectly regulated. Each kennel bore the name of a breed and a client number. The dogs looked healthy, but Marvin noticed something else. Silence. No barking. Not even a whimper. That wasn't normal. Ruby kept the conversation light, praising the layout and asking questions about adoption rates and veterinary supervision. Jace answered everything with fluid charm. "Our rescues come in with trauma, but we rehabilitate fast. That's the model." Marvin lingered near one of the kennels where a Labrador mix lay staring blankly at the wall. Its fur was too shiny, its eyes too dull. He knelt, trying to coax a response. Nothing. Jace glanced back. "They're sedated, temporary. Keeps anxiety low." That was the first lie Marvin could smell. Later, when they were being walked back through the boutique toward the front lobby, Ruby paused at the staff-only door. "May I use your restroom?" she asked innocently. Camilla blinked. "Of course, but it's under maintenance right now. We're having the downstairs pipes flushed." That was the second lie. They left without further comment, Ruby silent until they got back into her car, a dusty Subaru filled with empty coffee cups and press badges. She slammed the door, pulled out her phone, and tapped a number. "Detective Suarez," she said, "we've got a problem, a big one." Detective Elena Suarez was a stocky woman in her late 40s, short-cropped curly hair, dark eyes sharp as tacks behind thin glasses. She met Ruby and Marvin the next day at the edge of the parking lot, her unmarked cruiser idling in the shade. She wore no badge on display, but exuded the presence of authority like body heat. "We've been watching that spa for months," she said, voice clipped. "No cause for warrant until now. You're sure of what you saw?" Ruby handed her a hidden mic recording she had taken during Jace's tour. "More than sure. I also pulled business records. There's a holding room listed under the plumbing company that built the spa. Not licensed for animals. Want to bet it's under that maintenance hatch? That was enough. By 5 p.m., Suarez returned with a warrant and 2 other officers. Ruby and Marvin waited from across the street in the car as the team entered the boutique. Camilla was handcuffed within 10 minutes. Jace tried to leave through the back, but didn't make it far. He was shouting something about entrapment and defamation as they put him in the cruiser. The real horror was in the basement. Behind the door marked staff only, a narrow stairwell led to a locked sublevel where over 20 dogs were crammed into metal crates. Barely lit, poorly ventilated, the floor slick with urine and blood. Most of them were puppies. A few were marked with tags reading X3, R2, or S5. All of them looked half alive. One officer had to leave and throw up. Marvin went down there anyway. He stood among the cages, heart racing, fists trembling. One pup reached out a paw through the bars. It looked just like Tiny. They were never meant to be rescued, he muttered. By that evening, the story broke across local news. Ruby's footage ran with Suarez's statement. Animal rights groups picked it up. A GoFundMe for the rescued dogs passed 10,000 in an hour. Jace and 3 others were charged with animal cruelty, illegal testing, and fraud. But none of that erased what Marvin had seen. That night, he sat outside with Tiny asleep in his lap, the other 2 curled beside his boots. He looked out at the road, the trees, the thin layer of safety they'd fought to build. "Not this time," he whispered. "They're not going back in cages." Marvin had always believed pain came quietly, the kind that sneaks in at night, settles behind your ribs, and makes a home there. But the pain he felt when Tiny, now officially called Sunny by Liliana's insistence, refused to eat, cried when touched, and staggered sideways instead of walking straight, came loud and fast, and with no mercy. It started 3 days after the Soul Spa raid. At first, he thought it was just fatigue. The pups had seen too much, breathed too much rot. But while Dusty and River bounced back, tails wagging and paws clumsy with puppy joy, Sunny grew quieter. Her golden coat dulled at the edges. Her eyes lost their sparkle. By the 4th night, she collapsed next to her bowl. Marvin rushed her to Sunfield Emergency Veterinary Hospital, the cleanest place he'd ever stepped into. The lobby was white tile and glass, its cold air scrubbed of all scent. The front desk attendant, a young man with perfect teeth and a clipped voice, barely looked up when Marvin entered, holding Sunny wrapped in an old flannel shirt. "Emergency intake," Marvin said. "She's sick. Bad." A tech came to take Sunny, and Marvin sat alone for what felt like years. Eventually, a woman entered the waiting room. Dr. Cassidy Reeds, late 30s. Small-framed with tight features and a lab coat that fit too neatly, walked like someone used to walking fast and talking faster. Her dark hair was pinned up tightly, not a strand out of place, and her expression was all calculation. "She's been exposed to a complex chemical," she said without preamble, "likely absorbed through skin or ingestion. Liver's inflamed. Kidneys showing early signs of stress." Marvin's throat dried. "Can you fix her?" Cassidy hesitated. "With aggressive fluid therapy, blood transfusion, antitoxin treatment. First 24 hours are critical. I don't care what it takes," Marvin said. Cassidy folded her arms. "We estimate the initial cost at $1,500. That includes stabilization. Follow-ups and extended care could double that." He blinked. $1,500? She softened a little. "I understand. We have some support programs, but this isn't a rescue partner case. We can't discount this under standard policy." Marvin nodded numbly and stepped outside. He stood in the parking lot under a brutal mid-morning sun. His palms sweated against his jeans. The world buzzed, distant and hollow. 1,500 was an impossible number. He had maybe $72 to his name. Back home, he emptied the garage. The shelves were already bare. He pulled the rolling tool chest into the yard. A woman across the street, Sharon Langley, a retired mechanic who sometimes shared leftovers with Marvin, saw him dragging out coils of extension cords and sockets. "You opening a yard sale?" she called, frowning. "No," Marvin said. "I'm closing one." Within 2 hours, Marvin had sold off every tool he owned. People came out with cash and open palms. Neighbors, a scrap dealer, a young man in a truck who took his entire welding kit. He sold his jack, his drills, the impact wrench he'd had since before Isaac was born. By sunset, the garage echoed like an empty room at a funeral. He still needed more. The next morning, he sold the old motorbike, the one his son had once called junk but cool. A man from Miami paid $650 cash. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Ruby came by when she heard. "You're doing what they won't," she said quietly, watching him count the last of the cash. "The ones who broke her? They had everything. You have nothing, but you're the one trying to fix her." "I'm not fixing her," Marvin said. "I'm saving her." Ruby didn't say anything more. She left and came back an hour later with a local reporter. Maya Nguyen, mid-20s, Vietnamese American, with oversized glasses and a calm, steady presence. She was new to the beat, still learning, but her instincts were sharp. She sat on Marvin's porch and listened as he told the story. Not just about Sonny, but about all of it. The drawer, the snake, the scars, the spa. She didn't interrupt once. When her story went live, it was titled "One Man, Three Pups, and the Price of Survival." Marvin didn't expect what came next. By evening, someone had posted his Venmo. A stranger donated $5, then another. Then a woman from Oregon sent $20 with the message, "For Sonny, for your heart." By midnight, the total passed $2,000. Ruby knocked on his door at 2:13 a.m., phone glowing. "You did it," she said. "She's going to make it." Marvin returned to the hospital the next morning with crumpled bills, phone screenshots, and a trembling hand. Dr. Reeds blinked at the transfer summary. "This was raised overnight?" Marvin only nodded. She said nothing more, just signed the intake chart and disappeared into the back. Sonny stayed at the clinic for 4 days. Marvin visited each day, sitting in the waiting room with a sandwich he never ate. He didn't cry when she started walking again, but his eyes stayed red for hours. On the day she came home, the neighborhood watched. Sharon Langley brought a bowl of stew. Liliana drew a welcome home sign with glitter glue. Maria baked a batch of biscuits, half for humans, half for puppies. Marvin held Sonny in his arms on the porch swing that evening, her tail flicking softly against his arm. She was lighter, thinner, slower, but she was alive, and he had nothing left. No bike, no tools, no savings. But for the first time in years, he had a reason to start over. A week after Sonny came home, Marvin awoke to the sound of hammers, bright, rhythmic, echoing like heartbeat over tin. He rushed to the back porch in a panic, thinking someone was breaking in, only to find 3 men installing a new aluminum awning over the old garage. One was stocky, with sunburned arms and a ponytail tucked under a camouflage cap. The second looked barely 20, wearing a shirt that read, "Dogs over dollars." And the third, a lean Haitian man in coveralls, worked with quiet precision, barely glancing up. Marvin blinked. "What the hell is this?" The man in the ponytail grinned. "You're Marvin, right? We're the crew from Hearts and Hammers. People pitched in after reading the article. Somebody paid for your new roof. Said it was time someone fixed something for you." Marvin didn't know what to say. His voice caught behind the lump in his throat. He managed a nod and stepped back inside. He found Sonny curled near the base of the couch, one paw resting over Dusty's neck. River had taken to sleeping halfway under the bookshelf, nose pressed into a rolled-up sock he'd stolen. They were growing fast now, losing their roundness, gaining height, confidence. Their eyes were bright, their barks full. The house felt alive. He knelt beside them. "You've got names now, huh?" he whispered. "Sonny, for the little fighter. Dusty, for the rascal with dirty paws. River," he paused, smiling, "because you always drift where you shouldn't." That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Marvin opened it to find a cardboard box on the step. Inside was a full set of second-hand mechanic tools, organized, labeled, worn, but clean. On top sat a card with a paw print sticker and the words, "You fixed what matters. Now let us help fix the rest." The garage transformation happened quietly. People came by in 2s and 3s. Someone donated an old hydraulic lift. Another brought shelving units. A teenager named Kenny, shy and rail-thin with acne and chipped black nails, offered to repaint the sidewall in exchange for hanging out with the dogs. He didn't speak much, but River followed him everywhere, tail wagging like a metronome. By the end of the week, the garage had become something else. Not a business exactly, not yet, but a place, a haven. a place where lost dogs could rest and broken things could be repaired. Marvin called it Rust and Rescue. Liliana made a sign out of driftwood. Maria painted it with sunflowers. Maria, who once barely said a word beyond necessity, now came by 3 times a week, carrying pots of rice and beans, her heavy frame moving slowly but steadily, face always unreadable until she looked at Sunny. Then something in her eyes softened. Once, she sat beside Marvin on the porch, her hands folded over a tea towel. "I lost my husband to a drunk driver," she said. 4 years ago. We were going to open a bakery. After he died, I couldn't even knead dough without crying. Then Liliana brought me cookies shaped like dogs. Said she made them for your pups. I didn't cry. I laughed. First time in years. Marvin listened, said nothing. But he stayed there beside her long after the tea went cold. The puppies began drawing attention. Families came by to visit. Children left drawings of dogs taped to the fence. Marvin set up a donation box near the gate. Some dropped coins. Some left notes. One note, written in a child's scrawl, read, "I hope your dogs live forever." Ruby returned one afternoon with a real camera crew. No hidden mics, no urgency, just a local news segment about hope in strange places. She interviewed Marvin while he changed a tire for a neighbor's busted lawn tractor. The interviewer, Rosa Lynn, was in her 40s, bright smile, hair tied back in a loose scarf. Her questions were gentle, not staged. "What made you say yes to keeping them?" she asked. Marvin wiped his hands on his jeans. "Didn't feel like I said yes. Felt like they found me. And I just didn't say no." Rosa smiled. "And now?" Marvin glanced back at the garage, where Liliana was giving River a bath, and Kenny was organizing socket wrenches. "Now it feels like life gave me a second chance and dared me to waste it." The segment aired the next night. It was 5 minutes long. The anchor called it The Rooftop Guardian. The footage ended with a slow shot of Marvin sitting on the garage roof at sunset, Sunny beside him, looking out over the fence like sentinels. Afterward, people stopped him in grocery store parking lots. Someone sent him a crate of chew toys. Another mailed a thank you letter and a photo of a rescued mutt named Harley. At night, when the house quieted and the cicadas started up, Marvin sometimes sat on that roof. The breeze was gentler up there, and the sky wider than he remembered. One night, he called Isaac. His son's voice was older than he imagined. "I saw you on TV," Isaac said. "I guess I got lucky," Marvin replied. There was silence. Then, "I'm glad you didn't give up." Marvin looked down at Sunny, curled against his boot. "I didn't have a reason to keep going before," he said. "Now I've got 3. The Florida sun in July was an unrelenting tyrant, pouring down heat that turned sidewalks into griddles and air into soup. Inside Marvin Doyle's modest cement house, there was no hum of an air conditioner, only the occasional wheeze of a window fan and the rhythmic clink of ice cubes in mismatched glasses of lemonade. The walls radiated warmth like a clay oven, and every surface was slightly sticky to the touch. But the house was full of noise, motion, stories, and dogs. River barked from the backyard, chasing butterflies with the single-minded focus of a dog who had once been afraid to stand. Dusty lay on the cool tile floor near the front door, his tail thumping lazily whenever someone passed. Sunny, now sleek and golden with a faint scar down her side, was curled at Marvin's feet beneath the table, where he sat in a short-sleeved shirt that clung to his shoulders and a pair of old cargo shorts patched at the knees. The kitchen smelled faintly of Maria's arroz con pollo, and the walls were taped with crayon drawings from neighborhood kids, most of them featuring Marvin with a halo of puppies. It had been 1 year. 1 year since he'd heard that first cry in the grass. 1 year since he chose milk and bandages over electricity, and now, his house, once a forgotten husk at the edge of Homestead, had become a gathering place for those who believed in second chances. On the table sat a brand new book. Its cover showed Marvin sitting on the rooftop with Sunny beside him, the sun casting long golden rays behind them. The title, The Man Who Chose Dogs Over Dollars, was printed in bold serif font, and the author's name, Ruby Navarro, was written just below, smaller but proud. The book had made waves, not just locally but across the state. Animal shelters shared it, blogs reposted excerpts, and someone at a regional publisher had seen something in it that resonated far beyond dogs. Ruby had resisted writing it at first. "I'm a reporter," she said, "not a memoirist." But Marvin had insisted. "If you don't write it, someone will. Might as well be someone who knows how it smells." The book launch event was held in the community center's shaded outdoor space, beneath a tangle of string lights and beneath fans that spun slower than they should have. Marvin didn't own a suit, so he wore his best plaid shirt and washed his boots. Ruby wore black jeans and a navy blouse, her wild curls tamed just enough to be camera-ready. Dozens of people came. Some brought their dogs. Some brought donations for the rust and rescue shelter now fully registered under Marvin's name. Among the crowd was Isaac Doyle, Marvin's son, now 24, wearing a polo and khakis and holding a camera bag slung across his chest. He stood in the back, quiet but not distant. When Marvin was asked to speak, he stood behind the wooden podium, hands gripping its sides like it might float away. The sun was low in the sky, the air thick, but no one moved. Sonny lay at his feet, as always. "I ain't much of a speaker," he began, "but I know what it means to lose your footing. I know what it means to feel like the world moved on without you. A year ago, I had $300 to my name. I could have paid my electric bill, could have bought a bottle and forgotten the noise. Instead, I heard something outside. 3 little cries. 3 little lives trying to keep going. And I chose them." He paused, breath hitching. "I thought I was saving them. But the truth is, they saved me. From grief. From regret. From myself." There was silence. Then applause. Some wiped their eyes. Maria was crying, openly now, holding Liliana to her side. Kenny, standing beside the donation table, looked away, pretending not to be affected. But River bumped into his leg like a reminder that it was okay to feel. After the speech, Isaac approached. "Dad," he said softly. Marvin turned, surprised but calm. "You came." "I read the whole book in one night," Isaac said. I didn't realize. "I didn't know how to tell you," Marvin said. "I wasn't a good father. I walked away when I should have stayed." Isaac looked down, then back up. "You stayed for them. That counts." They sat together on the low wall by the parking lot, not saying much. Sometimes reconciliation doesn't need fireworks, just presence. By the end of the night, Ruby pulled Marvin aside. "They want to make a short documentary," she said, "about the shelter, about you." "I ain't some saint," Marvin replied. "You're not," she said with a grin. "That's why it'll work." Back at home, under a sky littered with stars and humidity, Marvin sat on the porch with a beer in one hand and Sonny's chin resting on the other. Liliana was inside, playing with Dusty and River, now both over 40 pounds and endlessly affectionate. The house was still hot, the air was still thick, but it no longer felt empty. Marvin whispered into the night, $300 and a broken man. That's how this started. And somewhere deep in the house, 3 tails thumped in rhythm, answering without words. This story is not just about saving dogs. It's about the way God works through the overlooked, the forgotten, and the broken. Maybe you felt like Marvin, lost, alone, with nothing left to give. But even the smallest act of compassion can become a doorway to grace. If you believe that miracles still happen, through people, through animals, through the quiet love that never makes the news, then share this story. Leave a comment with the word amen if you believe in second chances, if you believe that love, guided by God, can change everything. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real stories that prove faith, love, and a little courage can still move mountains. And may God bless everyone who watches this, especially those who feel like hope is out of reach. Amen.